Good morning and welcome to the urinary system. I'm just going to do a quick voiceover to help you understand a little bit more of the urinary system. Okay, what do we have here? Let's moving on. These are the learning outcomes that you'll need to know for when you do your online test and also to help you with your case study. Moving forward. Here we go. What are the structures make up the urinary system? There are four main structures, and we go into a bit of depth of them as we go along. So here, these are your actual kidneys that you can see there. On top of here is your adrenal glands. Now, this adrenal gland is not part of your urinary system. So we have our kidneys here, which are two bean-shaped organs. Coming out of the kidneys, we have what we call your ureters. Your ureters come down and go into your bladder here. This is your bladder, and as your bladder expands and fills up, when the urine comes out, it comes out of this little passageway here, a muscular tube called your urethra. Cool. So that's all your urinary system is. This is where our little babies grow in our uterus, and this gets cut off the back here is your colon, where your feces come out of your anus. Neat. This is your aorta, abdominal aorta, which is a huge blood vessel that comes off your heart, and this is your superior vena cava, which is a huge blood vessel that takes blood back to the heart. Don't need to know about any of these. You just need to know kidneys, ureters, bladder, urethra. Let's move on to those kidneys. So there's your kidneys. There are areas that you will need to label, I believe. So where are they? First of all, if you find your bottom ribs, they're quite high up in your back. People think kidneys are always really low in the low part of your back, but they're not. You've got to find your bottom rib, and your kidneys are slightly almost in your mid-back. Your mid-back. Good to know. They just look like two bean-shaped organs. Okay, it's the structure. And the reason you have them is to filter the blood to form the urine. That's their major job. But they also, when you're going to go into a bit more depth, how in the kidneys there's a hormone called erythropoietin, which helps regulate and balance the body of this acid-base balance and water and electrolytes, which you'll go into depth afterwards. This is a part I want you to label. Now, remember, you can stop and rewind my voice as much as you want. Your kidney in your book looks different to mine, but at the end of the day, it's good to have that because whatever image you look at on the internet or in A&P workbooks, they are slightly different. Okay, so this light area here where you can see my mouse is going on the all the way around the outside, the light pinkishy area is called your cortex. That's your cortex. This outside area here that you would actually touch and feel if you were to pick a kidney up is called your capsule, renal capsule. Individually, you've got these triangle looking things under this pink mark. Can you see these triangles? These are called your renal pyramids. So all these triangles are known as your renal pyramids. Cool. Now, in between each triangle, in between each renal pyramid is your renal columns. There's a column in between each one, renal column in between each one. Now, where this pink line is, what it is all your renal pyramids and columns all together in the middle area is called your renal medulla. The middle area. So it's not one particular thing, it's the whole area, the renal medulla. Cool. Okay, if we were to take away the arteries and the veins, and we could lift these two red and blue vessels away, if they could go away, can you see the yellow under here? The yellow? This yellow area is where all the filtered blood, all the urine, all the waste gets filtered into. And this yellow area is called your renal pelvis. Your renal pelvis. Okay, we're going to explain how these kidneys actually work. Let's move on. So there is lots of YouTube clips if you were to watch this again. First of all, we're going to do the structure and the function. So your ureters is what leaves the kidneys here. It's a long muscular tube lined with epithelium. Can you remember what epithelium is? It's cells that join together to create a real smooth lining. I remember I said the slip and slide. So a nice smooth lining. They are also lined with smooth muscle as well. So smooth muscle is involuntary. So once the kidneys have done all the hard work of filtering the blood, the waste, the filtrate comes out of the kidneys and they have to travel down the ureter to get to the bladder where the urine is stored waiting for it to come out. Oh, good. They're about 25 centimeters long, so they're pretty long. Bladder. So your bladder is right at your lower abdomen. You know when you want to go to the toilet where you feel the pressure. So it's right at the lower part of the abdomen. So the muscle, the bladder is a smooth muscle, and the smooth muscle has its own name, and it's called the detrusor muscle. It's like having your biceps, the biceps which are at the front of your arm, which is a skeletal muscle. Every skeletal muscle has its own name. This particular muscle here is called your detrusor muscle. Now, again, in this detrusor muscle, it's involuntary, so it constantly will contract and expand. And lined on the inside here, again, where is lots of epithelial cells that create a thick layer and also a nice smooth covering on the inside. So your urine can expand. Once it expands up to its full capacity of around 500 mils, it will then trigger off the stretch receptors in your bladder that tells your brain, I think I'm full now. I think I need to empty. Now, to do that, it has to go what we call through the urethra. Now, your urethra is at the base. Let me move. So this is another picture of a different type of a bladder, but just from a different book. When this is full and it's expanded as much as it can, it sends signals to the brain to tell your body that it wants to urinate. Now, this here is your urethra. We have a small urethra. Of course, males have a long urethra. Now, in our urethras, we have internal sphincters and external sphincters. Sphincters are like valves, but they're a smooth muscle that contract and relax. If you put your hand in the shape of a fist and you put a pen down the middle of your fists and squeeze the pen tight, that is a sphincter contracting. And if you want to pull the pen out of your fist, you have to relax your hand. That is your sphincter then opening. So you've got two in here. You've got an involuntary one that you cannot control, and you have an external sphincter, which you can control. So when this bladder fills up with urine and starts to stretch and sends a message to the brain to say, oh, I'm ready to go, this sphincter is already relaxing and opening. But you have the ability to hold on tight here until you make it to the toilet. Okay, so that's how your body system works. Involuntary, voluntary. Moving on. There you go. Sphincters, involuntary, voluntary. Remember, I want you to go over this PowerPoint without my voice. Here we go. Our urethras are very, very short. A male's urethra is very, very long. Hence the reason females contract UTIs way more quickly than males, because there's a long urethra, and by the time the bacteria or whatever it might have been going up the urethra, the natural body response has either killed it or it hasn't actually had the energy to make it all the way through to the gland. There's a prostrate, so that's the one that the males need to get checked up. If this was to be inflamed, you can see how blood would seep into the urethra. You can see how passing urine, if this was inflamed, would become tricky. So they're your signs and symptoms. Also, if this prostrate inflames, it's going to push on the anus area here, out of your anal canal. So there are lots of ways of monitoring a male's prostrate gland. They just need to be educated on what they're looking for. All right. Okay, if you watch this again, there's some fantastic YouTube clips I have on here for you to watch, but it just means opening this presentation without my voiceover. I would really like you to take the time to do that. Way! All right, so this is what basically does all the filtering in your kidneys. It's called the nephron. Your nephron is a cell that allows to filter all the blood and all the waste out of the blood to be filtered into what we call the renal pelvis, which then goes out of the ureters into the bladder. So, we talked a lot about cells. Your skin cells are keratinocytes. Your bone cells are osteoclasts. Now, your kidney cells are called nephrons. Oh, and we did the brain, didn't we? So the brain cells are called neurons. Now, your kidney is made up of millions of nephrons. Your nephrons is a working cell unit that filters your blood to get rid of waste. But they're pretty complex, okay? There's each area does something different. Remember, we are only generalizing this, and they're not actually that great and that efficient. But once you understand, it's nice and easy. Okay, so all of these are nephrons. I've just taken pictures from the internet, so you realize whatever picture you're going to be Googling or looking at, they're going to look different. But this one is quite nice and simple. I'll just see what the next one. Oh, we've got it all explained there. Right. Let's go back to our picture so I can explain. Here we go. So here we have your blood vessels that are entering into the kidneys. Now what will happen is, see this artery vein. Your artery always carries oxygenated nutrient-filled blood, and your vein takes away deoxygenated blood to go back into the abdominal aorta to go back to the heart and the lungs to get reoxygenated. Okay, so your artery has come into what we are going to be labeling when we go past your Bowman's capsule. So this big C shape, let's go bigger. This big C shape here is called your Bowman's capsule. And this cluster of capillaries here is called your glomerulus. So all of this oxygenated blood will be coming into your glomerulus. And whatever can get out of the capillaries and get in to the Bowman's capsule will. So there's these small little gaps, these small little junctions, and when the blood flows in, whatever can get out of these junctions, it will, with the force of pressure circulating in here. So some good and bad substances will be able to filter through into the Bowman's capsule. So there's going to be possibly H2O, there's going to be some gases, there's going to hopefully not be any proteins. Protein cells are too big to get out of here. If a protein gets out and shows in your urine, there might be some damage around this area called your glomerulitis, possibly. Blood cells are way too big to get out of the capillaries and into the Bowman's capsule. So there definitely should be no red blood cells in the Bowman's capsule. So whatever can get out of the blood will get through these gaps, good and bad stuff, and they will sit in the Bowman's capsule. Once it gets into the Bowman's capsule, it goes on to a small journey. Oh, and the journey is all the good and bad substances, we're going to give a name. That name is called filtrate. So whatever's come out of the blood and gone into the Bowman's capsule, all that fluid is called filtrate. Right, that filtrate then passes through these convoluted, because they're curly, tubule. Okay, convoluted tubule. Now this first part of the nephron is known as your proximal, because it's closest to the main engine, I want to say, proximal convoluted tubule. So proximal because it's closest to where it starts, convoluted because it's basically curly and convoluted in shape, and tubule because it's a tube. Now, even though this is a tube, there are small gaps, okay, and osmosis can happen as well. So as that filtrate makes its journey through the distal convoluted tube, the blood and the hormones in the blood, which are all circulating around this tube, the blood will recognize, there's too much water in this tube, in the proximal convoluted tube, and that's good. I don't want that to go out. I need to reabsorb it back into the blood. So the little blood brain is going, I need some more water back. I'm going to take it from this tube and put it back into the blood. I'm going to reabsorb it back into the blood system. Yay, we've got that back, the blood's saying. So this filtrate then carries on its journey, minus some of the good substances, carries on its journey to what we call the loop of Henle, as it goes down the loop of Henle. Now, there is a lot of activity going on here, but we don't need to learn that. That's going even more in depth. but you will see it in some of the YouTube clips. This filtrate then is now making its journey up into another part of the convoluted tube. Now, this curly part here is further away from the glomerulus. So because it's further away, it's in the distance, it's called distal convoluted tube. So this distal convoluted tube, which is making its way and going in and out of all the blood capillaries, it's making its way, all the filtrate is making its way to get to the collecting duct. But before all that filtrate can get to here, before we take it out to be urinated, what happens? The blood has actually realized there's some more crap, some bad substances in the blood vessels. So the blood vessels say, oh, I need to secrete, get rid of, take out some more waste from the blood, and I need to secrete it into the distal convoluted tube. So bad substances now that didn't get filtered in the first place come out of the blood and makes its way into the distal convoluted tube. Therefore, by the time it gets to the collecting duct here, it should be mainly urine. It's done all its toing and throwing and filtration in the nephron, but by the time it gets to here in this collecting duct, it's basically almost urine. Now let's see. So you're going to label that nephron. And as you label it, in your books, there's an area where you can see what each part does. So the glomerulus is those small, tiny little capillaries where small products leave the bloodstream. The Bowman's capsule is where it receives all those filtered products that's come out of the bloodstream. The proximal convoluted tube, that's where the blood goes, oh, I would like to take that back. I need some more of those substances. How did you get out? So proximal convoluted tube, the blood reabsorbs useful products back in, goes on its journey down the loop of Henle, gets to the distal convoluted tube, and the blood has realized, oh, I've still got some crap in here, or some unuseful substances. I would like to secrete that back into the blood, into the distal convoluted tube. So by the time that filtrate has got to the collecting duct, it's almost not called filtrate anymore. It's called urine. Now, when it goes to the collecting duct passes all that urine into what you can remember is called the renal pelvis of the kidney, not of the bladder, of the kidney. Neat. Now, all those blood vessels you saw going in and around the nephron, they are called peri, meaning round, tubular, because they're going round the tubes, capillaries. So if you can understand that and listen to this little podcast a few times, that would be fantastic. There you go, some practical activities. Cool. So you know the structure and the function of the kidneys and the nephrons and the bladder and the ureters and urethra and the sphincters. Now you need to know, well, what should urine look like? So here you have it here. You should know that your urine should basically just be amber in colour, like a light yellow, not a dark yellow. The smell, you should just have a slight odour in there, but not an offensive one. Now, don't worry about specific gravity range too much. What that is what the doctors or nurses in the old-fashioned days, some still use it. It's basically like they weigh the urine to see how much protein is in the urine. If there's a lot of protein, there's something abnormal going on within the kidneys. Why? A dipstick, a pH test, your urine should be around 6 on the pH scale. Now, what you drink and what you shower in, swimming, the pH range is 7 to 7.5. So when you hear about people in the desert that has to drink their own urine, at least you know that it's only 6% acid, where you actually drink 7 anyway. So it's not going to hurt them inside too much, apart from all that metabolic waste. Ugh, yuck. Volume changes, as you can imagine, but on roughly you want to be urinating 1.5 litres a day. That's 150 ml. That's a very large bottle of water. But of course, the more you drink, the more you're going to urinate. The less you drink, the less you're going to urinate. What is in urine? The main things that are in that urine: uric acid, urea, and creatinine. Now, creatinine is your metabolic waste of maybe muscle activity. Urea is a combined of substances like an ammonia. And uric acid then is the acids that your body has burnt up, part of the electrolytes and so forth. So they don't go into more depth, but you don't need to know anymore. So this is how it should. So you should know now if your clients, you've checked their catheter bag, or they've gone to the toilet and you have smelt something, or you're seeing something untoward. Maybe the color is brown, red, whatever it might be. You do have to ask some questions before you start making assumptions. So things like medication can change the color of urine, what they eat can change the color of urine and the smell of urine. So what you do need to do is find out some certain things of their medical history before you start making assumptions. Of course, it should not hurt to urinate. If they are getting sharp stabbing pains when they urinate, that could also mean a sign of infection like cystitis or urethritis or vaginitis. Remember, itis means inflammation. Now, I want you to go back to this PowerPoint and watch all these little YouTube clips. They're very informative and exciting. So please, they're only all small ones and you'll learn a lot. And a test you can do, I dare you to eat 2 cans of beetroot and have a look what color your urine is. So nice light subject that was. Just to finish off. So the kidneys on oh my God. So there is a hormone that is released into the kidneys, and the hormone is called aldosterone. Now, the hormone that is released into the kidneys helps to reabsorb sodium back into your body. To reabsorb, where is sodium really important? As you remember, can you remember the nervous system? Sodium and potassium is what you need to make a neuron to receive a stimulus and to send an impulse. So they always have to have that balance of sodium, potassium into your body. So aldosterone is a hormone that will go off into your kidneys, into the bloodstream, and always monitor the balance of sodium and to take it out of the nephron if needed and take it back into the body. So let's hope our aldosterone hormone is working effectively. That is released from the adrenal glands that sits on top of the kidney. Another hormone that is released actually from your pituitary gland that is in your brain, just at the bottom of your thalamus, hypothalamus. One of the other hormones which affects the kidneys is called your antidiuretic hormone. This tells your kidneys to reabsorb water. So if you're dehydrated, this hormone will be released to go into your kidneys to say, hey, look, this person hasn't had enough fluids in their body. We need to hold on to that water. Now, as you get older or things change, this antidiuretic hormone is not produced effectively. And what might happen is it tells your kidneys to hold on to more and more water. If your kidneys are holding on to more volume of water, there's less room for those blood cells. You just think of a bucket of water, and you've got half a bucket of water and you've got 10 ping pong balls in there. Now, if you keep filling that bucket of water up with a lid on, the first thing that has to be forced out of that bucket of water is the ping pong balls. Those ping pong balls are your red blood cells. So if your body's holding on to water, there's not enough room for those red blood cells. So what does your heart do? It works harder and it causes your blood pressure to go up. And that's called hypertension, high blood pressure. So there is a medication that's extremely common out there, and it's called a diuretic. Diuretics is the brand name, and there's obviously diuretics come under different types of names, but at the end of the day, diuretics is a tablet that is taken that promotes the person to go and urinate more often to get rid of the water within their body. By assisting getting rid of the water in their body, they reducing the volume of water that your body's holding on to, which will hopefully reduce your blood pressure. Many of your clients may be on diuretics. If they're put on diuretics, they are going to want to urinate more frequently. So just make sure you monitor that as well. Cool. Oh, stop that. Okay, just a little bit of fun. Renal failure, transplants, and what they all are. Have a little look at that when you go back over this. And you're going to be looking at urinary tract disorders. I'm going to do a little quiz now. On the quiz, I'm going to ask you structure and functions of the urinary system. I'm going to ask you everything that you've learnt in this quiz here, and then you're going to go off and you're going to do a little bit of research on a few urinary disorders, and then also signs and symptoms, what's happening, signs and symptoms, and how will you monitor change to this condition. Cool. I hope you enjoyed it and didn't get too bored. Enjoy yourself. Have a good day. Please go back over these PowerPoints without my voiceover so you can watch all the YouTube clips. Well done, guys. You're doing really, really well. Now, how do I stop?